Good morning, everyone. We are continuing with money magnetism. We're into the section of the book called The Method, and we're still talking about the power of concentration and what are the real obstacles to success in this venture. So let's start with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, Friend, Beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, Beloved Master Paramhansa Yogananda, Saints of all religions, dearest friend Swami Kriyananda, humbly we bow to you all. Help us to hear your voice, to feel your love, to share in your joy, that as we move through life we will know that you are guiding us and that the decisions we make are in the flow of your inspiration. We are your children. Guide us and bless us. Om. Peace. Amen. So, Swamiji has just a few, very specific thoughts here that I want to um, just summarize. I talked yesterday and in general a lot about the need for I think the word I want to use, I started to use the word is passion, for a passionate commitment to what you're trying to accomplish. Give yourself completely to everything that you do. That's a that's a very fundamental principle of the spiritual path. I never saw Swami do anything without fully committed energy. I was thinking recently of an incident, an evening that I spent with him once, and it was very early on in the path, on my life in the path, when in the early 70s, he had a meditation room. And Crystal Hermitage has since been remodeled so that now this closet that you go by on the way to go downstairs to where his apartment actually is, at that point, that closet was his meditation room. And someone had suggested to him that he could soundproof it with egg cartons, that you could get these flats where you could put like 2 or 3 dozen eggs on a flat. You could stack up the eggs like that. So you had this square of cardboard that was like 1.5 feet square, I would say, maybe 18 inches square. And it had all these little containers for eggs. So it was full of little points because it would make a little bed where an egg would sit. So when there were no eggs on it, it was very pointy. And it had an insulating quality. Now, you have to bear in mind that everything we did during those years, if you could get it for free or really, really cheap, that's how you did it. So someone suggested he could soundproof that room with these egg cartons. So he had put all these egg cartons into the room, but he found the shape of those egg cartons was very jarring, and he could feel it, and he really didn't like it. So he wanted to tear out all the egg cartons and replace it with smooth styrofoam. So we had these sheets of styrofoam, and we had to cut the sheets of styrofoam to fit the walls. We had to put the whole thing on the walls and conceivably on the ceiling, and get all the egg cartons out. And I remember we just started in working on that. And I was a hard-working person, but we started around in the late afternoon and we finished about 3 in the morning. It took like 10 or 12 hours. We must have stopped for dinner somewhere in there. But we absolutely worked without stopping. And why it took us so long is not clear to me, but it did. And what I vividly remember is absolutely how unrelenting Swami was in his effort. We were going to get it done. And there was no question that it was, moving up to midnight and moving past midnight. We were just going to get it done. And the feeling of that determination on his part, and yes, it was his meditation room. It was something that was very important to him, but it was also just egg cartons and pieces of styrofoam. It wasn't like he wasn't writing the oratorio or something like that, but he set his mind to do it, and we were going to do it. That was just all there was. And I can still feel inside of me the power of his will and his energy to do it. And the fact that it's stayed with me for 50 years vividly tells me what an important lesson it was. And that is the stuff of which success is made. That is the stuff which makes magnetism for us. And so Swamiji, when he's talking about concentration and willpower, let me just sort of get a few parts of this. The concept of multitasking was absolutely loathsome to Swamiji. He just thought it was the most terrible possible teaching, because then automatically from the start, you're not really concentrating on anything. All of your attention is divided up in all these different places. And without taking the power of your will and making it into a laser of one-pointed focus, you really will never accomplish anything notable in this world. You might be able to move a lot of small projects forward, but nothing really powerful will ever happen. So one of Swami's first and primary rules, because here the method for money magnetism is, first you must develop concentration. Now, one thing I've also observed is that when people have a problem in one area of their life, it's usually manifesting in all the areas of their life. They just may not notice, well, I won't say all, but other areas of their life. They just may not notice because it hasn't risen to the level of really being an issue. So people may think, well, I answer emails while I talk on the phone, or whatever it is that we're doing, or while I'm listening to you, I'm also checking to see if I'm getting other messages, whatever it might be, or jumping from task to task. Swamiji says, when you pick up a task, give it 100% of your energy and finish everything that you set out to do. And he talked about just keeping the promise to yourself. Now let me phrase it this way. I remember this thought came to me very strongly many years ago when a woman came to me for counseling, and she had a very difficult time. She was having a very difficult time with her mother. She was very angry at her mother. For whether she was justified or not is not relevant. She felt justified. And she was very angry with her mother. Actually, I think she was quite justified now that I think about it. She told me some stories that were pretty disconcerting. But she insisted to me that she had no problem with anger anywhere else in her life except with her mother. And that somehow just didn't strike me as true, knowing who the woman was. So I just started asking her questions. Do you get impatient on the freeway when people drive badly? When you're trying to make a telephone call and the line is busy, how do you react? When your coworkers in the office don't clean their coffee cups, but just let them pile up in the sink, what do you feel about that? When you go to a store to buy something and they're all sold out. And of course, what she began to manifest to me was that she was constantly responding with anger. But it would be a flash and then she would let it go. Or it would be a flash and she never considered it to be a serious problem. So what I was discussing with her, which is what I've understood to be true, I said to her, I feel that this issue with your mother is way too big for you to just approach. It's just like there's so many parts of it that for you to just kind of like go and try to do a frontal assault on this delusion of yours, which is what she wanted me to teach her how to do. I said, you'll never succeed. But you have the same syndrome, which is to act with outraged anger about countless things in your life. So what your response to your mother is not just about your mother, It's your habitual response to not getting your way. And so you need to start working on your habitual response to not getting your way, because it's a weakness within your nature that you're not going to be able to fix in its biggest manifestation. You need to work on it in all these ways in which you can have victory. So when we start talking about the need to concentrate and to have magnetism and to really put your will behind something and to have your enthusiasm and your feelings behind it, the way Swamiji, changed the installation in his meditation room, it was 100% of his will was behind that, and all his energy, and this absolute commitment to keep his word. To do, if I say I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. And to let nothing distract him. He was concentrating on this, and this is what we were going to do. So if we see in ourselves that we're not able to focus with sufficient concentration in something that is so important to us as magnetizing money, look around and see where else in our life that is not manifesting properly. And take each one of those smaller situations and give yourself a victory. Master had a very interesting piece of information where he said, if you're confronted with a karmic test that you know you're going to fail, he said, run away. And I always I was so surprised when I first heard that, because we sometimes think we have to die trying. And that is also valid advice. To die trying, sometimes you have to do that. But the reason Master said that you should run away when you know you're going to fail is because he said you don't want to reinforce a self-image that says, I can't cope. In other words, I fail. When I try, I fail. He said you don't want to reinforce in yourself a consciousness of failure. And one of the ways to avoid reinforcing it is to avoid those situations where you know you're going to fail. It was an interesting comment. Now let's go the other way. If we know that we're going to constantly fail at this major test that we're having to meet, go over here and create a flow of victory in the same attitudes in contexts where you have a chance of succeeding. In other words, train yourself. What are you doing to change your fundamental way of being? Just continually throw yourself against a closed door and just get bruised and just keep standing up and throwing yourself at it again without stepping back and doing those things you need to do to develop the ability to succeed. And so that's what Swami, and one of the ways he puts that is he said, look to the longer rhythms. Don't just think about what I can do right now in this minute to make this work. Think about I need to really develop the right talents within myself to be able to make this other reality work. So Swamiji makes a very good point of keeping your word as one of the ways in which we develop all kinds of magnetism, including money magnetism. Keep your word. If you say you're going to do something, do it. And once you've committed yourself to doing it, finish it. He says, keep your word to other people, but above all, he said, keep your word to yourself also. And it's very interesting in one of the weekly affirmations that we read for Sunday service. It says, my word is my bond, so also is my resolution. And it was very interesting to me when I read that, because I have developed the ability to make my word my bond. I had a very interesting experience with that early on again in Ananda. We used to walk, I lived at Ayodhya and I worked over at the publications building. For those of you who know Ananda now, Ayodhya is where Swami Kriyananda's house is, and the publications building what is now Hansa Temple was the publications building. And none of us had cars, so we would walk that distance. And so we would walk and we'd go through the farm area and then up the hill to the publications business. And during that period of time in my life, I was very, very Gemini. I'm still Gemini, but I was Gemini in this respect. I was always switching my focus. And my basic principle of life was to have fun. Fortunately, what I considered to be fun, generally speaking, was serviceful and generous. So it wasn't that I was evil, but I was always calculating what would be the most fun for me, and then I would shift over to what was the most fun. But sometimes the most fun would just be not to be very responsible, because what I had to do at work was boring, and it was more fun to help Ananta with the strawberries than it was to go on up to my office or whatever it was. But I set out one morning to go to work, and I was supposed to be at work at 9 at the publications building, and I actually literally arrived at 4 p.m. And I'd been very busy the whole time. It's just that I'd been switching my allegiance, all the way to work. And so it was many hours later before I actually got there, because I helped this person with that, and I talked to this person about that, and I went and did this thing over here, and then, just one thing after another. Seva, who was my best friend, my mentor, my spiritual guide, was the exact opposite. She was extremely focused, and she would just do what was needed of her, what was expected of her, without ever failing. And I arrived at the office at 4 p.m., having left at 8:30 in the morning to get there at 9. I walked in and Seva said only just 2 words. At 4 in the afternoon, she said, "Good morning," like that. And the whole thing communicated to me. It's the end of the day and you're just showing up from work. Where have you been and what have you been doing? But I heard it. And I realized that I had a serious problem with follow-through. I had a serious problem with concentration. I had a serious problem with keeping my word. And it became just an absolute principle with me that wherever Seva expected me to be, because she was my guide at that time, I would absolutely be there. And I even joked. I said, if we heard that Babaji was giving a satsang up at the meditation retreat, but I had promised to go with Seva into town to do our laundry, I would go to town and do the laundry, because it was more important to me to develop within myself the magnetic power of being able to focus on what I was supposed to do and to actually carry through and do it. And if we're trying to develop money magnetism, we have to be able, as I was saying, have been saying all through this, to put your mind to the objective and to hold to it. And if we can't do that in a big way, we're probably also not doing that in a small way. Or we should find the edges of where we can grow and have a victory. And when that victory becomes habitual, I'm living proof of this, because I've completely transformed myself over the years. I'm still not very systematic, and I'm still pretty Gemini. But a friend of mine actually gave me a very high compliment, which has helped me enormously, which I was complaining about some still circular way in which I go forward. And she sort of laughed and said, "Oh, but you always get it done." And I actually really thought about that, and I realized I do. I always get it done. I almost never fail to do what I say I'm going to do. I might not do it as efficiently or as clearly or as focused or as linearly as other people do, but I always get it done. And I'm putting that out to you because a clear conscience is a wonderful thing to have. And the magnetism of a clear conscience, nothing else will substitute for it. And a clear conscience is that I live by truth. These are the principles that are my principles, and I actually live by them. So if we want to be able to attract money, we have to become consistent all the way through. We can't just make this area work in the way that Swami's talking about it. Swami also puts it in terms of, he said, you need to become a cause in your own life, not just an effect. And he uses the phrase, he says, be who you are. Don't be an echo of other people's expectations and desires of you. I mean, one of the powerful things that gives us magnetism is that we have spent the time to understand our own nature and that we have confidence in it. This is something that's come up the last several times recently for me when I've been talking to the next generation of Ananda leaders, dedicated people who are working very hard and very, very well for Master, and who also have the correct idea that we don't want to be egoic in how we do things. We don't want to always be saying, this is what I want, this is what I want. But every good attitude can also be taken a little bit too far. No, we don't want to be egoic. No, we don't want to be guided by our likes and dislikes. But when it comes to our own destiny, we also have to be committed. And we have to put power behind the intuitions of our own soul. And I actually have used the word often, we have to be ambitious. Swamiji was exceedingly ambitious. He wasn't ambitious for himself, but he was very ambitious for Master's work. And he did not allow others to define for him, what was important. Now you have to be receptive, you have to be humble, you have to listen, everything has to be balanced. But you have to become a cause in your own life. And as he says, you can't just be an echo of other people's expectations for you. There's no power in that. If you're just doing it because other people said you should do it, we have to find out, what do I really believe? Who am I really? What do I feel Master is calling me to do? And I balance this by saying, don't set your stubborn will against the will of others that you ought to listen to. But even when you're presenting yourself as willing, you have to also be able to stand up and say, but this is also how I feel. I feel that, this is an important thing for me to learn. I feel that I'm not able to thrive in this situation. I feel that I'm not being inspired. I feel that I have too many contrary opinions with this other person just to be able to always go along and do what they think I should do. We can't be an echo of other people's expectations. We have to become a cause in our own life. Now, if we find ourselves hemmed in, where we only have a certain level of freedom, look for the places where one can take initiative. Look for the places where one can, follow through with the energy that's pouring through us. And Divine Mother will recognize us and support us for that. But above all, don't ever think yourself bound by what other people want. In the book, Ask Asha, which is a series of questions that I answered that different people asked. It's a very good book, by the way. It doesn't get much attention, but it should. This woman wrote to me. She was an unmarried woman living with her parents in India, and they wanted her to marry. I think they had a specific marriage that was arranged for her, and she did not feel at all that it was the right thing for her. But she wrote to me that she had to go along with her parents. Now, I understand that the Indian culture exerts pressure on young people in a way that I, as an American, do not experience. But I wrote back to her and I said, are you over 21? Which in America means, are you emancipated? Do you have your own passport? Do you have a job? Do you have your own income? Just like, are you ambulatory? It's like, when you say you have to go along, what you're actually saying is, it would be extremely inconvenient not to go along. It would cause disharmony. The comfort of where I'm living might be disrupted. People might be mad at me. My aunts and uncles might excoriate me. I mean, many things could happen that would be extremely inconvenient, even unpleasant. But to say it would be inconvenient and unpleasant is different than saying I have no choice. And so this is also what Swamiji is wanting us to understand. We always have a choice. It may be inconvenient and unpleasant, certain choices. These choices may be easier and more harmonious, but that doesn't necessarily make them right. This is where there is Dharma, there is victory. We must be very careful in how we think about things. You can say the inconvenience and the unpleasantness are not worth it to me, but that's what you need to say, not I don't have a choice. Because there's no power in that thought, simply. It's as simple as that. Swami also says, be fully conscious in everything you do, which is the same as put your full concentration on it and do it with your whole heart. Because that's what really gives us magnetism. Everything that we do, Swami did everything with his full concentration and his enthusiasm. That's why it was such a joy to be around him, because the energy level was always so high. And what that created was the same commitment from all of us. I mean, you had to be fully concentrated when you were with Swami. You had to be fully dedicated. When we were there replacing the insulation in his meditation room, I mean, it wasn't only Swami who worked without stopping, with full effort and attention. It was Seva and I also. We had no choice. That was the way the river was flowing. That's how we had to flow with it. Be fully conscious in everything that you do. Swami tells the story, I think he tells it in this book even, about somebody just showed him a card, a business card with a phone number on it. He'd never seen the card or the phone number before. Half an hour later, they needed to make that call. And the person to make the call was searching for the card. And Swami said, no, here's the phone number. He just dictated it. And she said, how did you know that number? She said, you just glanced at it. Yes, he said, but I concentrated when I looked at it. Just that. My full concentration. Always be fully conscious. When I was teaching a series of classes in different cities, and then I had to go back to each city and give the second class in the series, I said to Swami, how will I remember what I've done? He said, by being fully conscious when you do it. And it was actually very interesting to me. I mean, that didn't seem like an answer, but I realized, of course, when I was standing in front of a class and sharing these teachings, I was fully concentrated. I wasn't doing anything else. And it was very interesting to me when I would go back for the second class. As soon as I was standing in that place, I could remember it. I couldn't necessarily remember it when I was driving in the car, but as soon as I was standing there back where I was, it was like that kind of concentration leaves an imprint. And I stepped back into that imprint. I mean, this is how intuition works. This is how magnetism works. It doesn't come automatically, but if we follow the right method, it will come inevitably. And that's what we're seeking here. The long rhythm. If I just day after day do my best and cultivate those capacities of concentration and determination and perseverance and a long range view, and not allowing myself to be inappropriately influenced by other people's ideas, but holding strongly to what I know to be true, where there is Dharma, there is victory always. God bless you.